Hello everyone. Welcome to yet another show of EduTalks. Today we are very proud to have with us Miss Asha Alexander all the way from Dubai. Welcome ma'am.
Hello. It's really a pleasure to be with all of you, and I hope this morning session will be helpful to all the viewers.
Sure ma'am. And as we know, EduTalks is our attempt to get the best educators from across the globe, from India, from abroad, to come and address teachers and parents so that they can share their learnings, their experiences, so that we can gain from there. So thank you, ma'am, again for sparing your time. And ma'am, like just as to warm up kind of a thing, ma'am, we would love to know, like how your journey started off, ma'am, because I gather you started off from India itself.
Yes, I did. I was in India. I've had about 33 years as a teacher and an administrator. I began teaching at the Choice School in Kochi. My husband was in the Indian Navy, and it was the only profession which actually he allowed me to be a part of, as in he said you have to move wherever I go. So the only profession where I could drop something and pick up something while I was traveling with him to different cities in India was teaching. So I went ahead and I got qualified and I joined the Choice School. And then I was in several places. I was in Coimbatore in a school called Vidya Niketan. I was in Timpani School in Vishakhapatnam, in a naval public school. I was with Cathedral and John Connon in Mumbai when I was approached by Sunny Varki from the GEMS group to join the GEMS education. That was around 20 years ago. And I've been with them since. I joined GEMS Modern Academy. Then I went across another school called Our Own English High School, Dubai. And now I'm here at GEMS Legacy School, which is earlier known as Kindergarten Starters.
Okay. And then that's quite a journey across so many cities. So, like, which city did you love the most and why?
I don't think I loved cities. I loved people, and I found being in the Navy, it gave me a different perspective because it was very, very different. We had people from all communities. Though I learned Hindi in school, I could hardly speak. But once I joined the Navy, I had to address naval wives and sailors' wives, and I was forced to learn to speak Hindi more fluently than I knew it as a subject in school. So I think I loved traveling, and it really helped that I could see different cities. I grew up in Bangalore, and I never went out of Bangalore all of my youth till I got married. And this gave me a real opportunity to see not only different places, but how different leaders operated, how different contexts provided different kinds of education. So I was in very affluent schools like John Connon in Mumbai. I was also teaching children in the Naval Public School, which was open to sailors' kids as well as officers' kids. So I could see both ends of the spectrum, what was possible for in terms of resources. But I finally found that the best resource that I have learned as a leader is our teacher. If you have a great teacher, nothing else matters. So the resource that we all need, the best resource that leaders should have in schools is to look to see that the teachers teaching your children are competent, have the right kind of skill sets and attitudes that enable the children to realize their potential. So I love being everywhere. There was a difference in being in cities like Mumbai, and there was a difference in being in a place like Vishakhapatnam. I doubt I would have, of choice, gone and resided in Vishakhapatnam, but having stayed there, I quite liked the people and the place. Also learned a smattering of Telugu and other things as you go from place to place. So it was a very enjoyable experience, but universally the ability to have moved and seen. I was a principal in one school. I was a teacher again. Then I had to start again as a headmistress in one school. I went back to being a teacher. So being on both sides of the spectrum, I never asked for a particular position. I would just go in and say, I want a job. So whatever they thought I was fit to take, I took on. But I quickly learned to climb up that ladder because I had the skill sets of starting at the bottom every time and having to prove oneself. So it was like the Sisyphus principle, Sisyphus rolls up the stone and it rolls back every day. So every time you started in a new place, you couldn't rest on your laurels that I'm a great teacher, I'm a great principal, I have already been an administrator. I used the Sisyphus principle that this place doesn't know me, these people don't know me, and I have to prove myself as an educator every single day. And I think that is something I would want everyone to learn, whether it's teachers or students or parents. What you did yesterday is fine. Now, Neeraj Chopra won the gold at one Olympics. He can't sit back on his laurels. He has to start working from today so that the next Olympics he can repeat what he did. So that is the way in which it enabled me to see different sets of people, in different clienteles, different economic strata. But through it all, I understood there was a golden thread, and that was the teacher. If you had an excellent teacher, that is the only thing we need, whether it's online learning, whether it's in-school learning, the teacher has to be somebody who can draw the best out of the student.
Like when I hear about it, hopping from so many cities, different challenges across the globe, I would say. So it must have been some journey. So what I would like to know is that any something in the foundation years, like when you were in school or in college, or the people you met or got associated with it, like what helped develop this attitude of being, or the skill set that you're talking about, that being so agile, having that open-mindedness of being ready to start again on a fresh day every time?
I think a lot of it has got to do both with my schooling as well as my home, which I was born into. I was lucky to be born into a house where my dad was very liberal, was very keen that I learn everything. He never ever differentiated between a girl and a boy, made sure I drove a car, though it was not permitted. I drove a car at 16 when I was in India. But what really helped me was my schooling. And looking back, I think everything I know about several areas I learned in school, whether it's debating, drama, choir, playing hockey, you name it, everything we were exposed to was in school. And I had great teachers, and I just assumed that all schools were like the ones I studied in. It wasn't until I actually started on my journey as a teacher, I realized that I had a very privileged education. I studied at Bishop Cotton's Girls' High School in Bangalore, and then I studied at Mount Carmel College in Bangalore after that. I suppose my parents knew the value of education. My grandfather was a district inspector of schools during the British Raj, and he used to tell my mom, you need to give your children two things: good food and a good education. The rest of it doesn't matter. And that's something I advocate even to my children. If you feed the body well, and if you feed the mind well, the rest of it will come. Nothing else stays with you till the end. So it's you as a person, you need to look after your body and you need to enrich your mind. So parents, my father made sure that I got the best possible education he could give me. He didn't stinge on education. He made sure that we went to the best possible schools. We were three of us, but he made sure that we got that education, and that has stood us in good stead. I think that laid the foundation for who I am.
Okay. And now, any role models during the journey which helped you have this attitude? Like,
I would say my dad was very, very influential in what I became, because he never thought anything was impossible. He said, you've got to try it. So I developed what is like a limitless attitude, that I won't say no until I've tried something. And if it's possible for someone else to do it, if someone can teach me, I can also learn to do it. So this is something I try to cultivate in my own children and thousands of children and teachers who are with me, young adults, young parents, that if you set your mind to do something, and therefore I'm inspired by Nelson Mandela of all people, because in today's world, resilience, I think, is something that we must develop. It's great to be talented. It's great to be a genius. It's great to be intellectually capable. But if you don't have resilience, it's when hard times come that you really show your mettle. You really show what you're capable of, because most people will throw in the towel. But for this man to have actually stood by his cause, gone through that period of being incarcerated in jail, held on to his vision, come out and become the first elected Black president and change the history of that nation is remarkable. And like he says, you have to be a winner as a dreamer. And education is the only thing, if anything, that has changed the course of a nation, a history of its people. So that is something that resonates with me. And so I think if I wanted to be like somebody, I would like to have his resilience.
Like any episodes from your long journey where you went through such a challenging, like any challenges that you went through and learnings that you developed? Like
every day you go through challenges, but I sort of like challenges. I don't see, if there's some difficulty on the way, I have taught myself to take a deep breath, not to cry over spilt milk, but rather to see, what can I do now that this milk has been spilt? Can I mop it up? How do I get more milk? Where do I, what replacement do I look for? Because there are no difficult days. There are just difficult moments during your passage in life per se. But if you begin to look at these just as obstacles that you can surmount, you develop what we call the problem-solving attitude. And if you have that, I think you can get by. So I can't say there were no problems. There were plenty of problems as I went from city to city. But I never looked on it as a problem. I said, whatever it is, I can surmount it. I'll either walk through it, walk around it, but I'm not going to let that stop me from doing what I want to do. So I think if people can embrace that attitude, if you don't engage actively with life, life will pass you by. You'll just be sitting on the sidelines, because you've got to learn to solve problems on the run. You've got to live life. You can't stop life and say, I will pause life for now, I'll find an answer, I'll solve this problem, then we'll renew together. Life will pass you by. So if you want to live life fully, it is to just run with the problem, knowing that these are not just served up to you, it's served up to millions of people. Actually, if I look at other people's problems, maybe I'm in a much better path. But all problems can have some kind of solutions. It may come soon, it may take time. But as you grow older, you realize that there are problems which can be resolved immediately. Some I sleep over. When the context changes, the problems disappear. So I don't beat myself saying, I cannot solve this problem. Some of it has to be waited on to make sure that the problem itself changes. So these are, I don't think I've ever looked at something and said, this is hard. I wouldn't tell anyone life is easy. I wouldn't say I didn't have any problems. I had plenty of problems. But like a student, I would look at it as a tough question. Give it to me. Let me find the answer.
It's a wonderful way of putting it, ma'am. Like, it's just a tough question and I'll find the answer. So, ma'am, any cherished moments in your journey which you would love to talk about?
Yes, after I came here, one of the mindsets of people in this region was that I taught in some of the very affluent schools, and then I moved into a school which is for the mid-market, economically lower strata of people. But having taught at both ends, I felt my contribution would be more consequential in a school which didn't have privileged children. When you have money and you have everything, you may not be the only reason why they excel. It may be they come from backgrounds where their parents can contribute, they have access to the best resources, and therefore their excelling is solely because, not because of the teacher. But when you teach children who don't have anything, who do not have access to the resources that are there in the well-to-do schools, whose parents perhaps cannot contribute because they're busy working or they are not, fluent in the language, then the teacher's role or the administrator's role is far more significant in those schools than others. So when I came to this school, which I'm heading at the moment, it was a CBSE school and everybody was happy, rote learning. And CBSE has got a bad name for no rhyme or reason, because teachers and administrators choose to continue with the age-old model. They haven't changed. So 9 years ago, I adopted digital learning, and I removed all textbooks from the school. You can virtually imagine what kind of chaos that led to. Parents were questioning me. My administrators were saying, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because you'd be the only school who are going to work with our textbooks." And I said, I want to. I want to show you that it is possible. And at that time, the school was from kindergarten to grade 5. And I removed all textbooks. Teachers began to teach using a digital format, and they used digital resources for English, math, science. We didn't have textbooks. I heard a lot of complaints from parents and teachers, but they learned how to use the platform. Children became proficient with the use of technology. They could actually toggle between screens. The kids could do assessments online. I prepared the children way before the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, my school transitioned seamlessly. There was absolutely no problems. So when people were flailing their arms the world over saying, "What are we going to do? We've got to go digital," I was in a very, very comfortable place. So that is something that I am very proud that we were able to do in a time when it was not warranted. And I think that is vision. Vision for a leader means to be able to see ahead when others around you cannot see. That's why you need leadership. If you can see what's going to come and prepare the people for it, then you are placing them in a better sense of readiness than they can ever imagine possible. Similarly, I've begun something which right now I get mocked at quite often, is climate literacy. I'm embedding it in my school. All my teachers are trained. And now my goal is to ensure that at least 100 schools in 25 different countries will embed climate literacy by the end of this year. I am working with GEMS Education as its executive leader in climate change. And we already have 50 schools. But my purpose is this has to become a part of the curriculum. And there are not too many takers, too many people who are willing to lead this change. I believe in it passionately. I'm ready to handhold and help institutions make sure that it is embedded in the school. And I have seen the benefits I and the school had when we moved to a digital format, when nobody was ready. I feel similarly about climate change, that if we don't equip our children and our people at this time, we will be in a far worse situation than we can ever think possible. So there are careers for which children should be trained, like climate justice and legislation. There's a world of opportunity for children if only educators recognize it. I don't want to be one of those leaders who does things only when they're told to do by a board or told to do by the organization that we work for. I believe that it is my duty and my responsibility as an educator to foresee what the world might come to and to equip my teachers and my children and get them to a much safer place before a calamity can arise.
Ma'am, one question that I would love to take the opportunity to ask, given that you are from a different country right now and you have the experience of working in so many schools in India also, how similar or dissimilar is education like in India and outside?
I would just think I get a lot of good educators whom I hire from India who come across to Dubai and whom we train. I would just say that they're all very eager. They have the basic knowledge, they have the skill sets, but their mindsets are different, or they have not been permitted to employ their creativity. So a lot depends. So if they've worked with leaders who are allowing them to express themselves, have given them the opportunity to be creative in the way they teach, hasn't laid down, a very rigid structure that you will all teach lessons in the same manner in all the sections, then you will find those teachers are more creative if they've had a leader who's been flexible. But if they've come out of a rigid structure, I wouldn't say that the systems are any different. I would say schools are different because of its leadership and its culture. So if you belong to a school in India or here with a learning culture, and I see a lot of schools in India now from where teachers come out, where the learning culture is one where everyone's expected to learn and people are looking for progressive ways of teaching children. So we get teachers who are thinkers and learners. I look at the attitude first, the fact that the teachers are willing to embrace something different, they're willing to experiment, they're willing to try and be creative. If they were not permitted earlier, maybe in this structure, when I give them the freedom to be creative, which means making mistakes, learning from them, and continuing on the path, I wouldn't say just because we are in Dubai, we are way better than schools in India. There are other reasons. We are held up to standards. We have inspections here. So those inspections sort of hold us accountable. But I know there are schools in India which also have inspections, but the rigor of the inspections varies. As the inspections become more rigorous and as we are held up to achieving certain standards, all of the institutions start moving in that direction. So what I would say is there's greater consistency in this kind of methods in Dubai, for instance, than you might find in, say, Mumbai, because you have a series of, curricula, different governing bodies, different expectations, and therefore you might find the consistency in the education varied in Mumbai. But I'm sure in Mumbai and in Delhi and in other places, there are equally good schools the world over.
Ma'am, suppose I'm a teacher who is any part of the world, and so 3 words of advice or a playbook of things I should not do as a teacher, such that my classes are more enjoyable, my students learn more, or they grow better.
Yeah, I think teachers, should, our teachers focus more on what to teach than how to learn. So you must teach children how to learn, how to remember, how to ask questions, how to engage with the learning material. It's not important whether I know who took part in a war, so much as the learning I got from why war is a bad thing, or why, what are the learning that I can take forward. Most often we have been teaching content. We think the role of a teacher is to explain content to children and children just absorb the content. But what teachers should do, I think, is to make children ask questions. Most teachers ask children to keep quiet when they question. And yet, the only way you can learn is if you're curious. You have to go and find out things. For that, you have to keep asking, why does this happen? Why did this happen? How did this happen? We don't become just blind recipients of information. We question that information. Much of what we do in every organization I've been to, if I ask my staff, why are we doing this? They'd say, ma'am, we've been doing this for the last 15 years. But have you stopped to ask, is this efficient? Is there a better way to do it? No, ma'am, this is the way we've been doing it. And that is there in offices. That is there in literally every place, because we haven't been taught to question or are allowed to question. It's almost seen as impertinence. And that's the difference between Indians and when you go to the West, where people will not accept anything at face value. They will listen to you, but they'll ask you hundreds of questions. You have to convince them that this is as something that they could use. So teachers must move from just giving children loads of knowledge to actually making them a question and teach them how to remember things, teach them how to be mindful and aware, teach them especially in the digital world, not to just Google and research, but to be making what is fact and what is fiction. How do you know what's fake news? You need to allow them to have their opinion. We have to reinvent ourselves and understand that we are now, our role is a facilitator, our role is just along with students. We are also learners. We do not know everything, but we are there to guide and facilitate that learning. So that is something I'd like teachers to do. And I'd also like teachers not to label children and limit their self-belief, because there is now this thing, children are talented children are gifted, children are special needs. Every child is unique. Every child and every human being is capable of learning. If a human being has learned to walk and stand up and run and eat, then he can learn. And he may learn differently, he may learn slowly, but he's capable of learning. By labeling children, you're limiting their possibilities. You're telling them, you can't do this. And most often, schools and sometimes parents hold back children by telling them, you're stupid, you're lazy, you're not capable, you're not as smart as Sharmaji's son, you don't get 80%. And you grow up with the belief that I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough academically. I cannot learn English, or I can't learn math, or I'm weak in physics. I can never become a doctor. But those beliefs, I think, are labels that are put on us unknowingly, perhaps. Maybe nobody has any intention of harming a child, but words are very powerful. And if they're not used positively, and if they're used to label kids and limit their self-belief, then they can't grow into what they want to be. They have to really learn to get out of that system, which is far harder than if we would just stop doing that to children.
Okay. Ma'am, COVID came very unexpectedly, and teachers across the globe, and particularly in India, had to go through a huge upskilling exercise. We suddenly had to embrace technology, and I feel very happy of being very closely associated with them and seeing the way they have developed in terms of embracing of technology. And but West and other places, there was already embracing of technology, both from parents, students, and teachers. And so I'm like, what should I say? When things start opening up in India and you start seeing this blended thing coming in, which I believe is already much in vogue in other places of the world, what are the challenges they should be prepared for as a teacher?
One thing, everyone likes throwing jargon, blended learning, and I'm doing flipped learning. Even when you're talking about the West, there are so many places where things are not used correctly. Technology must be used, seamlessly within a lesson when it is required. When you're talking about learning, it's not just replacing the blackboard for a screen and you're doing exactly what you would do in the classroom. A different medium requires a different ways in which to deliver instruction. You can't resort to so if I have a chart paper behind me and I'm writing everything and you're going to look at it, I'm simulating a physical classroom. But it isn't a physical classroom. So you've got to adapt to the medium and you've got to use it more like your geometry box. You wouldn't use the compass throughout the day, would you? You would not use the set square. You would use it when you need it. Now, using technology seamlessly, whether it is your quizzes or so when teachers learn new apps, they want to do it in every class. They want to use everything they learn, in every single lesson. That is not wise. You must use what is most appropriate for that lesson. There is this whole range of apps that you have. You might want to use a quiz. You might use Mentimeter. Now, Mentimeter is sprinkled through every classroom. A quizzes is there in every class. And you're sort of showing your prowess as a techno expert in infusing the lesson with all of this. And there's a lot of fracture happening in lessons on account of too much disjointed technology being served up. It has to be seamless. when required, at the appropriate juncture, you should bring in the appropriate tool to assess. You should give the appropriate activity, not force it in to show people I'm using technology. But that said, the initial phase is always chaotic, where they will do all of what I'm saying, because that's how people learn. They need to experiment, they need to try out, and after a period of, say, a year or two, they will themselves come to the understanding, yes, this is better for history, this is better for physics, these kind of quizzes are better at the end of the lesson. I could begin with this in this part of the lesson. So it isn't that I can tell them what I experienced and I can try and prevent a pitfall. But what I see is, in most cases, when you give technology into the hands of children and adults, they experiment. That is natural. They play with it. They do lots of things. And in that process, they are learning. So, but if you can learn faster, and if you can listen to people who've used it and you learn from their pitfalls, maybe you will at least reflect and review, am I doing this? Am I doing too much of technology in a lesson? Is my lesson getting split up too frequently now let's move to the Mentimeter. Then children all disappear to the Mentimeter. And then, okay, write down your thing. And then that transition is not fluid, and children are not able to retain the core content because they're actually toggling, they're going from one screen, and there's more distraction than learning happening in the lesson.
And ma'am, like any words of caution, like this is one part for dealing with technology. And ma'am, about dealing with students in general, like should they be cautious, like post-COVID when the reopening starts?
You see, in COVID, everybody has had different kinds of situations. Some people have actually lost immediate family members. Some have lost jobs, and if the context in which children are learning is not a happy one, much learning can't take place, because all said and done, my mind is running over. What will I eat? I don't have anything in the lunchbox, or dad doesn't have money to buy me this, or there's lots of fights happening at home. If you do an assessment with that kind of a mindset, you may not do well. So teachers have to be mindful of the situations from which our children are coming. It is not what that I'm describing has happened in every home, but by and large, a loss of a job or a pay cut has been a reality in most homes. Loss of a relative or somebody known to you is also a reality. So children may not be the same kind of children that they were pre-COVID. So we have to be mindful of that when we begin instruction. Try and understand the context from which they're returning. Don't be in a hurry to start pushing knowledge, saying, okay, now you're back in school, open your books, you all were lazy, start writing, start copying notes. Because the idea is not just merely transcription, but in being able to put that theory into practice somewhere. So teachers, I think, should be mindful of children's mental health, and teachers' mental health, colleagues' mental health, from where they're coming in, because context is very important to learning. I can teach, but how much of it is being absorbed, how much of it is being learned and assimilated, depends on the context from which the children are coming.
And you have wide experience of, like you said, working in schools which had the access to the best of infrastructure and facilities, whereas schools who were not in a position to afford that. So you have an experience in both the worlds, so to say. So if I'm a teacher who is in a school which doesn't have access to a lot of facilities, and so what could I do in terms of, like, I understand you mentioned that teacher is very powerful, teacher is very important, and she can make a lot of things happen. But are there any easy hacks or easy tools which you have seen being used to great effectiveness, which sort of levels the playing field?
There are lots. If you are a really exploratory kind of teacher, right through Google, you can access a lot of free courses online, free tools online which you can incorporate in your teaching. It's not just about the tools, it's your mastery over your subject. If you are a master of what you teach, then you don't need to search anywhere. Every word that I'm saying is in my repertoire. I'm not writing it up and reading it to you off the screen. I know it, I practice it. This is what I do for a living. So if I know physics like the back of my hand, every concept, so you need to master your subject area, and you should be able to communicate that effectively. So we never had technology when we learned, but I still have a very clear idea of physics and biology and chemistry, even though I never went into a science related field, because I had great teachers who explained, who knew just about everything. So mastering your subject area as much as you can. Sometimes you think, oh, I'm only a primary school teacher, so I just need to know so much. That isn't true. You need to know much more. Even if you're teaching grade 12 students, you must know more than an MPhil or you must keep on learning about your subject, because it is the questions that are asked you. If you ask me a question and I said, wait 1 minute, I'll just check my notes and answer, that won't be a very effective interview. You would say, this lady doesn't seem to know what questions I'm asking. Similarly, if a teacher is asked a question and for every question asked, she has to refer something, or she says, you just listen to me and you pay attention and do it just this way, then you are not showing mastery. A master, I look for someone who knows his or her subject very well and who's able to communicate that effectively to students. I think that's the only hack. If I went to learn yoga, I would want the yoga instructor to have instructed several students in yoga, know the breathing techniques, know how do I assist a person who's a novice? How do I assist somebody who's 60 years old? How do I assist somebody who's 20? How do I stretch the student? How do I challenge the student? When do I give the student more challenging questions? When do I make things easier for the student? That is possible only when I know my subject. So the best thing teachers can do is learn as much as they can about the subject that they are teaching.
Now, like with familiarity with technology for students, so they're all getting very familiar, and I have my 3-year-old kid picking up the mobile phone and giving voice instructions, and the mobile is sort of giving him solutions to stuff like he wants to say lion sound. My 3-year kid plays, and then Google starts showing videos of lions there. So they're picking up a lot. So when you say technology, when you say mastery of the subject, if I were a teacher, I am dealing with students who now have access to a lot of information and a lot of subject matter. There's a lot of videos out there, a lot of content out there, and so how important, like you just mentioned that while the teaching part, the how to deliver that content is also important, but subject matter expertise is non-negotiable, is what I understood from you. And going back a little back, you mentioned that tools are to be seen as like a geometry box. You don't use a compass wherever, you use it appropriately. So all I'm saying is very scary when I'm hearing it.
So I will tell you, when I started using technology, I gave iPads to my kindergarten children and to the young ones. I was told that, this is absolutely crazy. The parents had certain apprehensions, which also they have from Google, that this is very harmful for the children. You see, we all are using technology which are prevalent today, which it just is there. We all use our phones, we do mobile banking, which we didn't do a few years ago. You take 10 years ago and I would still see people going to the bank, standing in a line, filling out things.
Absolutely.
Today the things have completely changed and we've adapted. And we say, oh, that's okay because we're adults. But children also start changing in the environment around them. They see dad on the phone, they see dad and mom on the computer, and they see the teacher on the computer, and that's what they emulate. That's what they want to do. If you really look around, you really don't have so many toy stores anymore. Toy stores that sell dolls and little figurines, because children don't want to play with dolls and figurines. They want to play with technology. They want to play with some video games. They want to use the phone. There are so many. That's what attracts them. That's what is around them. Now, every tool that you place in the hands of the child, you have to teach the child to use it safely. When I give a pencil to a child, I tell them it is to make marks in the book, not on the wall, not poke somebody in the eye, not to stab somebody on the thigh or on the hand. You use it, and we monitor to ensure that's what is done. Now, there are children who, in spite of it, will poke somebody, who will injure someone, who might occasionally scratch the wall, or if parents are negligent. In some homes, I've seen the entire wall inscribed with all kinds of things. Now, we all have to be responsible. It's not just the school or the parent, but together we have to be responsible for the child we are raising by telling him, this is how you use the tool safely. Whether it's a pair of scissors, whether it's a car on the road, everything is governed by rules. You break the rules, it results in an accident. Okay? But it is not something that happens every day if you're careful and you're managing the rules. You have to teach children the pitfalls of technology. You have to tell them what happens if you stray, if you go into the dark web, if you go into some site which you're not supposed to see, if you upload pictures or emails or texts which remain in the cyberspace forever. You have to teach them cybersecurity. That is the same way I would teach a child how to hand a pair of scissors to somebody else, or how to wear your seat belt before you switch on the ignition of the car. These are things parents adapt to when you're saying, okay, those are rules. This is also a tool, and used well, it is effective. Used inordinately, too much of anything is bad, and too much of relying. So children should be made to learn about fake news, able to distinguish and discern what is correct and that the first 10 things that Google throws up is not necessarily the most reliable information. When children are taught those things, they begin to discriminate. They begin to recognize, oh yes, there's something. Everything that comes on WhatsApp is not true. But the adults today, why are we blaming children? I get hundreds of forwards every day. Oh, I saw this. They're all masters in WhatsApp degrees, all pushing information which somebody's put on WhatsApp. It may be engineered, it may be morphed, it may be created content. It may not be true, but we are ready with mindlessly, without even discerning the content, asking yourself, is this right? Is this necessary to forward? How will it benefit the receiver? We don't ask those questions. We just see, oh, this is what it says, holiday tomorrow. Everybody hears of it before it even comes out in the papers or it's authenticated. So I would say, don't be afraid of things. You have to live in this world, and your children are going to grow up. Whether you give it to them at 3 or you give it to them at 10, they're going to come into contact with technology. The earlier you teach them the safe use, the less excited they are when they are teenagers. I'm totally against introducing this to children at teenage, because as it is, they are in a turbulent state. They want to explore. They go up behind the wrong things. If you introduce them early and they've got over their excitement of a device and monitoring and Googling and finding out, then the urge and the excitement that a new device gives is not so exciting. If you tell children something is not to be done, they more than often do it. So you have to tell them, here it is. If you tell somebody don't smoke a cigarette, you can bet they have tried smoking cigarettes in school. If you tell them don't drink, they will find a way to drink. Don't drive the car, they'll borrow a friend's car and definitely try to learn driving. What you do is, here is the device. This is how it works. These are things that you can do. And then there are dangers associated with the wrong use of it. And that's a collective responsibility. It's not on the school, it's not just on the parent, but it's also on the user. We never hold our children accountable. But ultimately, the right or wrong use of a thing is the responsibility of the individual using it. And the individual should understand there are consequences when it is used incorrectly.
Any word of advice regarding, like you mentioned about one of the skills like resilience? So as a parent, we should try that our child develops skills of resilience. And being agile, one thing that I picked up from your journey, that is one skill set that has helped you throughout, and being able to start from zero and seeing every day as a fresh day. So anything that any skill which you believe would be very important for a young child to start developing at now, and something parents have a very big role.
The most important skill is problem solving, and that is something that we do not allow our children to do, either as teachers and as parents. I'll tell you, when you have a young child and he's about to go and do something, you run in and prevent that thing from taking place because you want to protect the child. You'd say, no, I don't want him to get cut, I don't want him to get hurt. But what I have learned is definitely now consolidated in research, which says that if you give the answers to the questions, you're short-circuiting the connection between theory and practice. You know something, we are always wanting to give the children the question and the answer. Parents expect the question and the answer to be taught in school. If the answer is not taught, you can be sure the parents will come and complain to the principal, this was out of syllabus. This question was not taught in class, which means the answer to this question was not given. We as adults, as parents, we continually problem solve for our kids. And that is not just in school, but whether they get a job, whether they have children, whether you have grandchildren, whether a big calamity happens. We want to be there to solve their problems. Then your child will never gain the ability to solve problems. If there is what we talk about 21st century learning skills, but I think these skills have always been there, but it's now more pronounced because situations which are happening warrant more problem solving, because there are all kinds of problems around you. That's the overarching skill, because under problem solving, you have to use creative thinking, critical thinking. You have to use the ability to apply what you've learned. But problem solving is a mindset and a skill set that we must give our children by allowing them to encounter problems. So if a child is struggling with a sum in class, the teacher doesn't solve it for him. You allow that experience of frustration where the child tries his level best to find out the answer. That's learning. When a mother sees a son struggling to get a job, you don't go and talk to a friend and say, give him a job, because I can't bear to see my son struggle. If your child is encountering some problem not getting into the basketball team, you don't pull strings to get your kid into the basketball team. You must understand struggle is a part of learning. And if you don't struggle, you're not learning. Everything that grows needs to be stretched. It must hurt, whether it is muscles, whether it is your brain being taxed, or whether it is that you're going through life enduring hardships. Every difficulty gives you that strength. And when you've overcome it, your understanding, your satisfaction, your ability has increased leaps and bounds. If this happens again, I know what to do. I don't need mom, I don't need teacher, I don't need my neighbor. I can overcome this problem. So problem solving and all these skills are now coming into focus because there are more people and more problems. Less food, less employment, less quality education, overcrowding of classrooms, illnesses. It's not that problems didn't exist before, but the amount of problems we encountered were not as frequent as they are now. And That is one thing I would want both teachers and parents to give them enough independence. Let them try, let them fail, let them fail and fail and fail again, because that is learning. A notebook without cross marks, a notebook with all ticks, a notebook which says 10 on 10 doesn't give me any indication the child is learning. I would look at the notebook and say, this child's not being stretched if he's getting all 10 on 10. This is way below his ability. I would want to see mistakes. I want to see corrections. I want to see the child trying again and getting it right and saying, yes, now he's learning. We have reached a place where we are wanting instant gratification, instant answers, instant everything resolved for us. We don't want to see struggle. And I think I'm not a good parent when I watch my child struggle. But struggle is the only way you can make your child strong enough to face the world on his own. And that struggle starts from when he's crawling to sitting to standing. The less you assist, the better it is for the child.
Absolutely. It's like a butterfly who is developing. If we try to open their wings for themselves, then that butterfly dies. It's that painful process is very important so that it develops the skills and the strength to do it for themselves.
Absolutely.
So if as a parent I am creating this artificial environment or saying that no, I don't want my child to go through the same pain that I went through, indirectly I'm doing a disservice. I'm destroying his chances of being a successful person in the
future. As a parent, you can definitely share your experiences, but you should not give the answers or try to do the things. When I set homework for a child, I'm not setting it for your dad and mom. I'm setting it for the child to see how much he remembers, how much he can recall, how much is understood. If you do his work and send it to me the next day, I am not to be blamed if I assume that this child has understood everything absolutely correctly. Then when he doesn't do well on the test, you cannot blame the teacher because you did his homework. It's something where we have to go and reflect on the way we as adults are behaving. We are living vicariously through our children. We want them to do what we didn't do. If we didn't get an A, they must get an A. And I ask all parents who come to me and say, ma'am, he got a D, he got a B. I ask, did you get an A in all your subjects, in all your classes? No, ma'am, we didn't. That time, no, we would only get 5 on 10. Okay. I said, if you were not so fantastic and your wife were not so fantastic, how do you expect your offspring to be so fantastic that he'll get all A in all subjects? The unrealistic expectations we set for our children, yes, there are children who are doing fantastic things because of the opportunities that are provided to them. Some children are exceptional and they get the right kind of teachers and they go on to excel. Of course, everybody can aspire to such expectations. But expecting everything to be perfect, especially I find, this is most relevant in the younger years, from kindergarten to say grade 3, where parents want their children to do perfect work. Okay. Then there is a period of neglect from around 5th grade to around 8th grade, where the parent thinks now he's learned, let him go, he can do everything. Absolute. Child is free, he's doing something, whether he's learning, parents have no clue, no one's interested. Then they wake up again by the time it is the board examinations and wonder why our children are not doing so well. You have to be an engaged parent, but not a parent who's like a helicopter. You've got to be there for your child. You've got to know what your child is doing. You've got to encourage, be a champion for your child, motivate the child, set realistic expectations, and allow for failure. As a leader, I have realized that, the more I am flexible, the greater capacity it builds in my teachers. So I have a skeletal structure, which I expect, but within that structure, I allow them to move whichever way. Because it is that freedom that allows you to learn, to explore, to build your own capabilities. And no two people will grow at the same pace. But I know it is possible for even the weakest person, whoever you call the weakest child, to do well in school if he or she has a right teacher.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. Thanks a lot. So,
Yeah.
a playbook for teachers and a playbook for parents. It was very lovely to get your perspective on it and drawing from your experience and sharing it with us. Thanks a lot, ma'am. I know it's a busy schedule and you took out time for us. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. This is something I'm very passionate about, and the more I get to speak to teachers and adults and children, I would like to let everyone believe that you're learning. Your brain is so powerful. Your learning can be just limitless. You are limiting yourself. You are the one standing in the way of your success. Whether it's a teacher or a parent or a child, anything is possible. But for everything that we want to achieve, there are no quick fixes. Some things take time. The growth of a child, the growth of a skill set, I can't close my eyes and hope to see the child will be a teenager and then an adult. It doesn't happen. So you've got to wait for some things. So a learning of a language or getting proficient in cricket or making it to a team or excelling in music, they will get there. It comes with practicing whatever you know. And it means encouraging, motivating all the time. If the child is given motivation and you can keep that focus, if teacher and parent recognize that, every child's life would be so much simpler and they would all reach their potential.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot, ma'am.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.